This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to Spouses Talking Houses with husband and wife real estate team Jennifer and Brian Frost. Everything you want to know about buying, selling, investing, and owning property. So let's get real about real estate.
Welcome back to Spouses Talking Houses. I'm Jennifer.
I'm Brian.
And today we're going to get real about what is your home worth? How do we put value on property? We're going to cover what's the definition of value, how we go about performing a market analysis, and then what are some of the common myths and mistakes that people make in regards to value. But first, let's catch up, talk a little bit about that realtor lifestyle. We're back in the studio for the first time in a couple of months.
I think about 2.5 months.
Yeah.
We've been doing these at home from our dining room table. I definitely prefer this.
Yeah, I hope the sound and video quality is a little bit better for you guys than it is when we do it via Zoom.
Yeah.
So the other thing we did is we went and got ourselves tested last Thursday for both antibodies and for COVID. And
Just for curiosity.
Yeah.
Neither of us had really had any symptoms, but New Hampshire started offering this about 10 days ago, I believe. So, and you set it up, and
we're both negative. We're negative for the antibodies and we're negative for the virus. We've been taking all the precautions, but right before we quarantined, we'd been in a couple of large groups of people. So
sure. I guess it shows that the social distancing thing is working.
yeah, so I guess I'll keep wearing my mask and gloves to Market Basket.
Sure.
Yeah. And certainly when we show houses, we're mask and glove, and I really only go out into houses about once a week now. We do as much of this as we can virtually.
Exactly. And I think we're going to see more of that going forward in the new normal.
It's more convenient for people.
I agree. And I think most people, over the last couple of years, I believe people have been spending a lot more time on the internet researching homes before they ever even go out and interview an agent, before they
Right.
go out and see any properties. So
Right.
I think it's a natural transition.
And, related to today's topic, it has made it a lot easier for us to have conversations with people about house pricing because they have already done a little bit of research before they have that conversation with us.
Oh, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah.
And I think I think it's going to be more the norm where we go out and show 3 or 5 houses versus
30 or 40.
Yeah, back in the day. So,
Though
and I'm all for that.
it helps us do our job, though, the more homes we see and the more neighborhoods we see.
It is true, but it also helps. They're doing all this research, so they have a better feel for what they want before they even go out and do the search.
Right. And now I'm after 30 plus years in the business, and you too, there's most styles of homes in most neighborhoods we're familiar with already.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So I thought we would start off and just talk about what's the difference between a CMA, an appraisal, and an assessment.
Sure.
And I'm going to look into you.
Okay.
This is your department.
All right. An appraisal is it's an opinion of value done by an appraiser who is either licensed or certified in the state in which you're doing the appraisal. A CMA is done by a salesperson or broker and is analysis of what the appropriate offer price may be on a property or the appropriate listing price, and those are generally on a range.
Yep.
An assessment is done by a municipality to put a value on a property. It's more or less a yardstick, and they apply a mill rate, a tax rate to that. And that generally does not equal market value in most cases. They need to adjust those values so they can pay their budget every year, whatever their annual budget is. And they also lag behind market values, generally by a year. So,
and they're valuing, they're doing a mass valuation of a lot of properties, and they're not going in them individually.
They're using a basic formula and applying that across the board.
Right, which brings us to AVMs and Zestimates. If you refer to our other episode about Zillow, the Zestimate, that automatic valuation model, it's just a ballpark, and they claim to be really their accuracy is within 5% in either direction. So in a $300,000 home, that's a $30,000 swing right there.
That's also just a claim.
It's also just a claim.
I'd say a Zillow estimate is probably about as accurate as the assessment.
Yeah, it's somewhere in the ballpark.
Yeah, and it could be either way, depending on
exactly.
what the situation is.
And each of those different valuations has a different purpose. So a market analysis is for the purpose of a buyer or a seller determining value for a transaction. And the transaction itself is the true market value.
A willing buyer and a willing seller
Right.
with no undue duress.
Exactly. So that's the textbook definition.
Exactly.
An appraisal is usually used for financing purposes. And so they're looking at what is this worth as collateral for the loan. And so there's a lot of different restrictions and technicalities on the appraisal that are not involved in the CMA.
Yeah, the lender does not want to over-lend on a property.
Exactly. And there are other purposes for appraisal too. Probate, divorce,
Insurance,
that type of thing. Yeah. So when we go about valuing a property, when somebody calls us and they're thinking of selling, or when we're working with a buyer and they've seen a property and they're thinking of preparing an offer, we do a market analysis. And when I say we, Brian does it because he's the appraiser, and then I give my opinion on whether I think his opinion is right or not.
I am wearing my my realtor hat
Right.
when I'm doing a CMA.
Yeah.
I'm not when I do a CMA, it is not an appraisal.
And that's important. I just think that because you're an appraiser, you have a breadth of information and experience
Sure.
in the analysis that you can bring to it.
You would think that I would be able to do a very good CMA being an appraiser.
You would think so. However, when I have a different opinion, then
Well, true. Well, appraisals are objective and CMAs are most often subjective.
okay.
So depending on the use and who your client is, are they selling? Are they buying? Obviously, I work with a lot of buyer clients. I go out with them. I'm an appraiser. I don't want them to overpay for a home.
Right.
So
right. Me
I
either.
even, admittedly, I'm probably a little more conservative on my CMAs than most agents, but I guess that would be natural. So, and then, sometimes I do a CMA and I'm not really, positive, or I don't feel that comfortable with
Yeah.
the value. And I just
Yeah.
say, Jen, take a look at this and what do you think? And, sometimes you're going to be more accurate than I am, depending on what the market is, the property and
Yeah.
knowledge of that particular area.
Yeah, and a lot of times there are things that in an appraisal, because it is objective, it's, these are the facts. And with a market analysis, we're also looking like, what is the market going to respond to either positively or negatively?
True.
Yeah, and so that is more subjective.
You're looking more forward, where an appraisal is always looking backward.
Right.
We're not projecting into the future. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't really forecast what's going to happen 30 days from now, 6 months from now. I mean, I have an idea, but I really can't project that.
So that brings me to where we start. The first thing that we start with is we look for comparable properties.
Also known as comps. That can be any property that is sold in the area that has a similar location, similar size, similar room count, acreage. You take all those features into account to really determine what's an appropriate comp. But in a CMA, you're also looking heavily at actives, what your competition is. And also pending sales, because that really tells you what's happening right now.
Yeah.
We also do that when we do appraisals. We look at actives and pendings, but we generally weight the closed sales.
Yeah, you're using the closed sales to come up with your value.
Exactly.
And then you're using the others just to see if the market is trending.
Right. The lender wants to know, well, is it declining? Is it still appreciating? Is it level? Yeah.
Right. So textbook. I'm going to go back to textbook, which doesn't always apply in New England. What would be an ideal comparable as far as distance?
Sure. For lending purposes, the guidelines are that your comp should be within 5 miles. That's unrealistic in most communities in New Hampshire.
Right.
Out in California or Texas or wherever where they
Atlanta,
have
yeah.
tract housing or a
Yeah.
high population density, their comps, or in a city, their comps all might be within 1 mile is what they prefer,
Right.
within 1 mile.
Yeah.
New Hampshire, you're lucky if you're going to get one of your comps within 1 mile, depending on what community you're in. So I look at it as if property is in a similar neighborhood and is influenced by similar factors in the same town.
Yeah.
I think that
So similar school systems, similar
Sure.
commute, similar tax rate.
Sure.
Yeah.
And sometimes you are in a position where you do have to go to abutting towns that are going to have different tax rates, different school systems. So you do have to make adjustments when you do that. You don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to. You want to stay in the same community.
Some of our smaller towns, though, just don't have that
sure.
much sales activity.
Right.
And a lot of the smaller towns also have cooperative school districts. So then I'll try to stay within the same school district, even though
Sure.
there might be differences in tax rates. What about how far back do you look for sales?
Sure. Generally, when I get an order for an appraisal, right away I'm looking back at least a year.
Okay.
The sales that you use, you prefer to have within the last 6 months, and really, you really want them within the last 3 months if possible.
Yeah, you want it in that same season,
Right.
basically.
And in an active market that we're in now, that's usually not an issue. But when we get into a slower market, and there's only been 6 sales in the town of whatever it is, X, over the last 6 months, you're going to have to go back further.
Right.
Or you're going to have to expand your search to abutting communities.
Okay. Now, what about the size of the home? How similar are you looking,
Sure.
what range are you looking for?
I believe Fannie guidelines right now is you want something under 25% of the living area.
Okay, so if I have 2,000 square feet, 25% of that would be 500.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking up to 2,500, or I'm looking 250 on either side.
Yeah, if I'm looking at a 2,000 square foot house, I'm gonna run comps from 1,500 to 2,500 square feet.
Which is a pretty broad range.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't really want to use a 1,500 if I don't have to, but I prefer to use something between 1,750 and 2,250 in that case.
Yeah.
The closer the better.
Because I'm thinking in my mind, the floor plan of a 1,600 square foot house versus the floor plan of
Sure.
a 2,400 square foot, very, very different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Room counts are important too. Size, is not always the determining factor. You can have a 3-bedroom and a 4-bedroom, they're the same size, but one of them has an extra bedroom.
Right.
Which generally will mean that the bedrooms are small.
Right.
But that's
Right.
not always the case either.
Yeah.
So,
Your typical colonial that is a 3-bedroom has got a master bedroom that goes front to back on one side and 2 bedrooms on the other.
right.
And then your typical 4-bedroom in that same footprint size house is going to have 2 rooms on either side of the stairway. So your master is going to be smaller, all your bedrooms are going to be smaller. So it's really a flip of a coin, which one is more desirable to the market.
True. One thing I will say about the home size, that's probably one of the easiest adjustments that you'll make.
Right.
Because you're doing on a square foot basis and you're doing it to each of the comps the same way.
It's super, super objective, yeah.
Yes, it's it's definitely objective.
Yeah. And then what about style?
Styles. We have so many different styles here in New England. I know when you go to
I like that.
when you go to other parts of the country, that's not the case. But I think it's more important to stay with comparing single level homes to
Right.
single level homes.
Right.
Ranches to split entries. You don't want to compare a colonial, which is a 2-story home, to a ranch
Right.
if you don't have to.
If you don't have to, yeah.
So that's generally the way I look at it. And also, contemporary homes tend to have, I'm going to say, overall less appeal, a lower pool of buyers that are willing to buy a contemporary home.
I think that might be changing a little bit. But in general, what I see is that people don't like the exterior look of a contemporary home, but they love the interior.
Oh, the interior features, yes.
Features,
You're right. You're definitely
Yeah.
seeing a lot more contemporary features being built into homes. But I guess I was talking about the more like
Angular.
you said, the exterior
Yeah.
contemporary look.
Right.
It's like a log home too. Some people love log homes, and some people are just not going to look at them because they're rustic.
Our first home was a log home and our current home is a contemporary. So,
But also, you have some of these log homes with very contemporary interiors.
right.
So,
And then some really do look extremely rustic. Yeah. Yeah. What about the type of transaction? What is a non-arm's length transaction?
a good example of a non-arm's length transaction is a family sale where a family member is offering another family member a house at a reduced price.
Yeah.
Another one would be for just transfer and to transfer to one family name to another trust per
For
se.
like probate
Right,
purposes,
and
or
we call that
estate planning,
where
yeah.
no money is changing hands. So we call it's a there's no money changing, so it's a non-consideration transfer.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
So that would be a good example. And those aren't always clear. If you look at the assessment cards, they usually do have codes that will say whether it's an arm's length sale or not.
Right. Because you don't count those when you're determining value.
No, and another distressed sale would be obviously a bank-owned or a lender-owned
Short sale.
a short sale,
An
exactly.
auction.
So you have to be careful when you're choosing your sales to make sure that you're using an arm's length transaction. And that's one of the questions I always ask an agent as an appraiser when I'm following up to find out if there are any concessions or unique circumstances in the deal. Was this an arm's length sale? Were there any factors that may have affected the sale?
So an arm's length would be the house was exposed to the open market, all buyers had opportunities, and so you know that you got market value because it was exposed to the entire market. What about, let's say that it was an MLS sale, but it was a divorce or some other type of distress. I don't usually consider that to be an undue influence as long as it was exposed to the home market.
Yeah, if the home was exposed for the normal marketing period, whatever that is, it's usually
Right now it's a day.
Right now it's I was going to say 2
1 day,
weeks if you're lucky, but in a slower market, a balanced market is what, 6 months.
Yeah.
So as long as it's exposed, whatever that normal marketing time is, and people were able to view the property and people were able to bid openly on that property, a divorce really shouldn't make a difference.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me. Cash sales, a lot of cash buyers in particular think there's a cash discount. I don't see that.
There's not?
No. It's cash to the seller.
Right. I mean, as a seller, I don't care if the buyer has a mortgage or whether he gives me cash, I still get cash.
Right. I mean, you care in that there's less contingencies with a cash buyer. And if you have a property that's not going to not going to qualify for financing. If you've got a property that's in such bad shape, and that is a distressed sale, by the way, that it's not going to qualify for a mortgage, then there's a little bit of a cash discount because your buyer pool is only cash buyers.
Right, and it's more due to the condition of the property.
Exactly.
So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So now, once you've identified your comparables, how many do you like to have?
Lender guidelines. Most appraisals are done for mortgage financing, whether it's a sale or a refi.
Yeah.
The guidelines right now, you need to have a minimum of 3 closed sales. They want them within the last 6 months.
Right.
They also, most of my clients specifically request 2 active listings and or pending sales.
Right.
So those are comps 4 and 5.
But when we're doing a CMA, we don't have those guidelines.
True. Oh, when we're doing a CMA, I generally use 4 or 5 closed sales, and then I'll use whatever's on the market that's I really think is similar to the property. If there's nothing on the market, you can't include that. But if there are 5 or 6 properties on the market that I consider competition, then I would include them all.
We seem to usually have between about 1 and 4 as competition lately. Yeah.
And the thing with the CMA is it can be very simple or it can be very detailed depending on the property and the agent. Many CMAs are just the properties are put into a program and it will develop a value.
Yeah.
I prefer to do a sales grid, which is similar to what we do in an appraisal, and make adjustments to those comparables only on the sold properties. But that way I feel my CMA is more similar to an appraisal than most.
Well, you want to compare apples to apples. And in an
Sure.
ideal world, when I went to put a valuation on your home, I would have the home across the street and the home on each side had also recently sold, and that they were all the exact same size, floor plan, interior and exterior, And of course, at that point, who needs me to tell you the value? You know what it is, because that's apples to apples to apples. But we don't get apples to apples. We get properties that have differences in age, in lot size, in location, et cetera. So what do you generally make adjustments for? What are the features that you're usually looking at?
Well, as I said earlier, the most important thing is location, of course.
Yep.
Location.
Right.
The next thing I'm looking at, the most important features are probably age of the home,
Yep.
room count. Acreage is also important. You're not going to be comparing, if you don't have to, you don't want to be comparing a 10,000 square foot lot to a 5-acre lot.
Right. Right.
Which obviously that's location because
Yeah.
that's so the most important things are size, room count, condition, age, and style.
And style and quality. I'd say
Quality
too.
also, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So a couple of the questions that we get frequently from not only consumers but also other agents like to pick our brain about value and adjustments all the time. So a big question that we get is regarding acreage. And my opinion is, if I've got a house that's on 1 acre and the comps are between 3/4 of an acre and 1.5 acres or 2 acres, the usable yard is probably pretty similar. I've seen enough homes to know that there's going to be between 1/2 acre to 1 acre that's cleared, and there's going to be a buffer of woods around it.
Sure.
So I don't usually make an adjustment for that type of difference. Do you?
I have to agree. I mean, I usually consider that excess acreage.
Yeah.
And but I have seen many appraisals. I do review appraisals also where appraisers will adjust whatever it is, $100 or $500 per extra acre or 1/2 acre or whatever it is, and I always look at it and say, "Man, they are good."
They know exactly, right?
Hey, he's a better appraiser than I, obviously. So.
I mean, if you're farming and you have a certain number of acres that you can plant and plow, I think that matters. But if your wooded buffer is
Sure.
as long as you've got a usable yard and you've got a buffer, that's pretty typical in this area.
Well, and the other thing I've learned over the years is that it's better to make fewer adjustments than more adjustments. I can remember early in my career, I over-adjusted everything, and I've just learned over the years that if you're doing less adjustments, you have truly comparable properties, and I think that's the route.
Well, the better your comps are, the less adjustments.
Well, obviously, if your comps aren't very simple, then they're really not comps, but you may have to use them anyway.
And I do think you just gave us some sort of a metaphor for life. As you get older, you make less adjustments.
Less mistakes. I don't know if that's the case.
One of the other questions that we get is, some people want to get super granular about the adjustments. I put in this brand of countertop or what have you. And, really what we have to look at it is, when we're comparing houses, is we have to look at it as we're grading them. They're A through F, or they're excellent, good, fair, and poor. And so once you've achieved a grade of A, you don't get extra credit beyond that.
In most cases.
Yeah, we're going to compare you to other houses that have a grade of A.
But wait a minute.
Yeah.
I just spent $100,000 on landscaping and a pool.
Right.
And the appraiser only gave me $15,000.
Exactly. Well, that's exactly it. You can over improve and go beyond, and cost does not equal value. But let's just talk about pools for a second here in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. What are they worth?
Well, I generally, as a rule of thumb, I mean, every situation is different, but I'm definitely not giving more than 25 to 50% of what that replacement cost is on a pool in New England, particularly in New England, when you're only going to be able to use it 3 or 4 months out of the year, depending on where you are. If you're in New Hampshire, you're only using it for 2 weeks, unless it's heated. So, and I learned that the hard way. So, I'm glad not to have a pool anymore. So,
Exactly.
But I mean, people can go crazy doing outdoor features, patios, pools, fences, and whatnot, but rarely are they going to get what they put into it. So
When I do a CMA with a pool, I give it virtually no value because my feeling is that half of the buyers want it, half of the buyers don't want it. So you
True.
just cut your pool of buyers in half.
right, it's also a liability issue. People have young kids; they may not want a pool.
Yeah. If I'm marketing a house with a pool, I want very pretty pictures. I'm going to play it up.
Summer fun.
Because the people who want a pool, this is the house that they should buy.
Exactly.
It's not a great investment for as far as return on investment for resale. It might be a perfect return on investment as far as your family goes.
Sure.
Yeah,
And
enjoying it.
for appraisals, above ground pools are considered personal property. I'm not giving any value to
Right.
an above ground pool because technically the owner can just take it apart and take it with them.
Right,
That rarely happens.
right.
But
But you're not giving value.
but also you can just poke a hole in the side too, and then it's literally worth nothing. So
Is that what happened to our pool?
I'm not saying.
You're not saying. Anyway, so in addition to just adjustments, one of the things that I really like to do that you taught me how to do is bracketing. So when we look at our comparables, we might have a group of apples and oranges. So I look at one and I say, in all ways, this particular house is lower, worth less, inferior to my subject property. And then here's another sale that I know that I feel in every way, location, size, quality, age, etc., is superior. And once I have that bracket, I know I've got a range, and I'm just going to tighten and tighten and tighten and tighten the range.
Or hopefully you have that third comp, which is exactly
like
your property, and then you're all set.
Right, right. And when it comes to adjustments, people sometimes get all wrapped up in what's a fireplace worth, what's a garage worth. To me, your fourth fireplace is not worth as much as your first fireplace, and your third stall garage is not worth as much as having no garage.
It's simple. Just use regression analysis to come up with that adjustment, and put it in there. And
Oh, make
you're all
us
set.
smarter. What's regression analysis?
You don't want to know.
No, explain.
I mean, it's a model, a computerized model that's taking mass data. I mean, a huge amount of data, and telling you what that half bath is worth based on sales over the last 5 years. And it's really not. It really doesn't apply here in New Hampshire. No matter if somebody's telling you they're using regression analysis in New Hampshire to come up with a full bath value, like I said, they're a better appraiser than I. I mean, maybe I'm saying out in California where they have tract housing and whatnot, and you have all this data, yes, I can see that being applied. But so they've been pushing actually for us to use regression analysis, and like I said, I use it every day.
What you would need is you'd need 10 to 50 houses that were all identical in all identical circumstances except for the bath. And then you know what the bath is
right,
worth.
But in the real world, the way these programs are, they're taking all these different features and applying values and then pulling that one value out. It's just, I know what a bath's worth in my market.
Okay.
And it really comes down to also what price range you're in too. Obviously, a full bath in a $300,000 home is not as worth as much as a bath in a $750,000 home.
Yeah. And if I've got a 2-story home and it only has 1 bathroom, then I've got another 2-story home that has 2 bathrooms. That means I've got a bathroom on the level with the bedrooms and a bathroom on the level with the living room and the kitchen. The difference in those 2 baths is huge.
Yes. So in that first case with the 1 bathroom, 2-story home, we refer to that as functional obsolescence.
Okay.
And sometimes it can be cured and sometimes it can't. So a good way to look at it is how much is it going to cost me to fix that functional obsolescence?
Right.
And that might be an adjustment value depending on what it would cost you to get that second bath, that half bath on that second floor.
And then that same house has a half bath on the first floor, 2 full baths upstairs because the master has one, and then a bath down in the basement. That bath down in the basement doesn't really add much value.
Right. It really depends on what is typical for the market. What does the market expect? What does a typical buyer expect? They expect a half bath at least on the first floor,
Yep.
if there's no master bedroom.
Mhm.
And then on the second floor where the bedrooms are, you're expecting at least one full bath, and then obviously two full baths if you have 4 bedrooms.
Yeah, and again, in your price ranges and what you're comparing to is going to make a big difference
Sure.
there. If we're looking at some entry-level homes and it's a lot of older New Englander type houses, they might not have an upstairs bathroom.
No.
And that's typical. And so as we compare our apples to apples, we don't have to make adjustments.
Sure.
We've got a few more things to say about how to value a home. So stay tuned next week for part 2 of this episode.
Music courtesy of the Eric Lindbergh Trio. Please visit his website at www.ericlindberghworld.com. Jennifer and Brian are licensed to practice real estate in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Brian is also a certified general appraiser in New Hampshire. They are not lawyers, accountants, home inspectors, or therapists. Real estate customs and rules may be different in your area. Each Keller Williams Realty office is independently owned and operated. The Realtor name is trademarked to members of the National Association of Realtors. If you are currently under contract with a real estate agent, this is not intended as a solicitation. Views expressed on this podcast by Jennifer may not be shared by Brian and vice versa, nor are they necessarily the views of Keller Williams Realty.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Cafe, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.